Thanks for tuning in to more NFL Draft Talk on the Ourlads Football Network as we talk Jacksonville Jaguars football with John Oehser, who is the senior writer for Jacksonville at, what is it, Jaguars.com, right, John?
Yeah, Jaguars.com. Yes, sir.
That is the official. You can't get any more official than that, covering the Jacksonville Jaguars. John was with us last about probably almost around this time last year, I believe. Something like that.
Yes, sir. That's right.
Good to have you on again, John. I know you're real busy, so thanks for taking the time to talk to us about the Jacksonville Jaguars draft and how it affects their depth chart. So I got to ask you how the fans are feeling, because they knew they were getting Trevor Lawrence. Like, everybody knows that. But it's got to be so cool to be a Jag fan, especially how things have, they've been a struggling franchise for so long. And then to not only get Lawrence, but then they get Etienne. Just a few picks later. I mean, these two guys, if you watch college football, you're watching these guys in all these big games over the last 3 or 4 years, and they're now on the Jags football team together. That just must be an awesome feeling for the fans.
Yeah, it is. And obviously the focus was Trevor. And, with a player like that, I'm sure it'd be this way for a lot of franchises. You hear about it. You've had trouble at the quarterback position for so long. And then all of a sudden the stars align late last year, where all of a sudden you've got the number one pick. It almost didn't feel real, I think, for a lot of fans for a long time. And then it was almost a case where, for a lot of fans, they were going to have to see it to believe it. They were going to have to see photos of that hair in this jersey. And as a fan, I get that feeling. It's been a struggle for a long, long time. And you've almost got to say, okay, I'll believe it once he's actually there. So there was very much a feeling on draft day of a renewed energy because of that. They knew logically he was going to be here, but boy, seeing that hair in that uniform, as I said, was a huge boost for everybody. And I think the fans had the same question about the Etienne pick. I think they were looking at it. It was a surprise that they went running back there. I'm not sure that they expected it, but then once they figured out, okay, this is the role he's going to have. He's going to be a receiver, hybrid running back. They drafted him with the idea that he would give them an explosiveness. And I think once the fans realized what Urban Meyer was talking about with that role, I think there's definitely an excitement around those two guys.
Yeah, because I know that when as much as the team struggled last year, there was really you can count the number of players in one hand that actually gave a sense of pride last season, and one of those guys maybe at the top was James Robinson. And
sure.
Here he is, and you go out and you draft a running back in the first round, and I could see the fans' initial reaction being, "Oh, why would you do that?" I mean, Robinson, he's our running back, so I think that obviously was probably a necessary thing for Urban to come out there and explain himself. But still, I think it's just when you could put a fantastic football player like that on your football team, I'm sure the fans now understand exactly why he's there.
Well, as you know, in this league, you can't just look at the depth chart and think, okay, there's going to be 22 players playing. They will use James Robinson and they will use Travis Etienne, and they're almost different positions. I mean, James Robinson will be lining up behind the quarterback. I think Etienne's going to be lining up everywhere. From what Urban has said, if you think about the Percy Harvin concept when he was at Florida and the way he's used, that's the name that Urban talks about with Etienne. He's not saying he's going to be at that level in terms of impact because they don't know yet. But conceptually, as you know, you need more than one tight end on a roster. You need more than one running back in this day and age on a roster. So that's really, if you just see the depth chart, then you think, well, where's he going to fit? Well, once you see it on the field next year, I think you'll see where Travis Etienne fits.
Yeah. And as far as Lawrence, how I know it's only been a short while, but how does he been fitting in with the community already? How's that look?
It's a little, as you alluded to, it's a little tough to know exactly, but it's as embraced as it possibly could be at this point. There's been a whole lot of instances where he's out and talking to a whole lot of people. But for instance, the day he gets drafted, The day after he gets drafted, he shows up here, and there's a classroom full of kids, or there's a group of kids from the same class of from an elementary school here in town.
Okay.
Well, the first thing Trevor doesn't go over to the Jaguars people who are waiting for him. He goes over and talks to the kids. Many instances like that. Before the draft, a group of fans had already bought him 2 presents off of his wedding registry. He got married a week before the draft. So I think you're seeing cases like that where he's clearly going to fit in. As time goes on, I think you're going to see a guy who absolutely embraces being in Jacksonville. He's from Georgia. It's not a long drive from Jacksonville. This is a smaller town than most NFL communities. I think he will embrace that. To me, I think he would have been a perfect fit anywhere because no fan base isn't going to embrace Trevor Lawrence. But this feels very in sync with both. It's just the perfect fit for this community, this quarterback. I'd be surprised if this doesn't work out well for the long term on that front.
All right. Well, let's I tell you what, let's stick with the offense. And a little bit later on, just looking at the skill position, the team went and used up their 5th pick on Luke Farrell, the tight end from Ohio State. A classic wide tight end, somebody with a lot of potential as a really good blocker. That's what you're going to get more than likely in the 5th round. But where does he fit in right away? Looking at the depth chart, there was a need for some more talent at the tight end room. Is he going to get every opportunity to get 1st or 2nd string reps as early as the season?
Yeah, a tight end's the position that still feels very fluid on this team right now. Chris Manhertz, who they signed from Carolina, has a reputation as one of the better blocking tight ends in the league. It feels like he's going to be the blocking tight end, the main guy. Luke Farrell's being brought in. Yes, he brings blocking ability. I think he also is expected to be a huge special teams guy.
Okay.
I think they want to see where he can develop and what he can develop into. At Ohio State, the word is he showed some pass receiving skills.
Yes.
He just wasn't used a whole lot. So how he develops, where he takes that, I don't think they think he's going to be a major impact as a receiver early. I think they hope that he might be, but I think the expectation level is he comes in, he can block, he can play a role, and then let's see where he goes from there. But that's pretty typical of a 5th round player anyway. I mean, you can talk about their immediate impact. Usually 4th round or below, there's a year to develop and then see where they fit in after that.
And speaking of that, how does Tyler Davis fit in for his 2nd season?
Good question. I mean, I think that is when you're dealing with a new regime, new assistant coaches, essentially a new general manager. Trent Baalke was here when they drafted the 2020 class, but he was not the GM when they drafted the 2020 class. So I think this OTAs, this training camp, is very much a rookie training camp for a lot of those guys in the sense that you come in and you have to see where you fit. So Davis didn't play a whole lot last year. He had some injuries. I think this year's a key year for him. And frankly, I don't know how he fits, and I'm not sure the team quite knows how he fits yet until they see him on the field with these coaches.
Okay. Wide receiver, and there were only one as far as the draft, and that was the last pick, the 6th round pick, Jalen Camp. A player that he was kind of there, like a 6th, 7th, or priority kind of free agent type of guy, but Jags liked him good enough to pick him in the 6th round. Didn't go to a passing school. I mean, look, right. Georgia Tech, they did a lot of running until last year. But he did have a 17.1 average. And that's typical of those Georgia Tech #1 receivers, even when they were just more of a running option team. But what was the like of Jalen Camp at this point? Did they see a specific fit for him?
Probably not this year. Remember, this was a team that had no 7th round picks when they picked Jalen Camp. So, as you know, late 6th, 7th is as much a way to keep a guy off of collegiate free agency as it is an indication of where you like a player, if you follow me. So they knew that he had some traits that might translate into the NFL, which is what you're looking for late in the draft. You want to find something that the team likes enough to say, okay, this is a strength that we can develop everything else around him. I think what you said is exactly right. Hadn't gotten a whole lot of opportunity at Georgia Tech, but when he did, he made big plays. So they feel like he might be a diamond in the rough. He's got the speed. He's got the size to potentially be special. Bring him in, see what he can do as a gunner on special teams, see what he can do in that capacity. Urban Meyer said right after the draft, talked about him as very much a developmental guy, might not make an impact right away. Let's see what he does the second year. But this is about seeing a trait and seeing what you can develop.
And Josh, Imatter Bebe is somebody also that I'm going to definitely ask you about when we talk again during training camp, because he's somebody that put up some pretty good numbers for Illinois the last 2 years as the number one wide receiver. So I'm intrigued about how he's going to look during camp. Elsewhere, I mean, Dorsett was signed. Marvin Jones obviously was the big signing, but you had the 2 draft picks from last year, including Laviska Shenault, and there's still a lot expected from the young guy, including DJ Shark, who is still the number one guy, correct?
You would have to think so. Going in, he's the number one guy. That's probably not completely fair to Laviska Shenault, who came along last year and started making the kind of athletic, big body plays that you expect from him. Yeah, Shark's number one because he's been to the Pro Bowl and he's had a 1,000-yard season. I would see those two as being, obviously very important. Marvin Jones is sort of the X factor. If you look at Marvin Jones's numbers the last few years, it makes you wonder why he couldn't be a number one. I mean, so they've really got 3 guys because of the nature of the offense and because we haven't seen them in this scheme before. I'm a little hesitant to say who's 1A, 1B.
Okay.
It's an interesting wide receiver room in the fact that you just named 3 guys, all of whom it wouldn't shock you if at the end of the year any one of those guys had 1,000 yards. I mean, there's not really a guy you think, okay, no way you could do that. And then you've got Colin Johnson, who they drafted in the 5th round last year, who showed some flashes as a big body guy. You've got Dorsett, who Urban Meyer has said, look, they need to be a big play, or they needed to add elements of players who could make big plays. They didn't have enough explosiveness on offense. I don't know that Dorsett's a 1,000-yard potential guy, but he's sure a guy that it wouldn't shock you if 4 or 5 times a year he had a field-flipping play. So that feels like his role to me. It's an interesting room in that sense because you've never seen any of these guys in this offense. How are they going to fit into this Urban Meyer scheme where this team really wants to get fast? They want to be explosive. They want to use even Travis Etienne at wide receiver some. So I'm really waiting, honestly, until early in the season, preseason, to see exactly how some of these guys are used. They're keeping it under wraps, but I think you could see some roles, Laviska Shenault lining up at running back like he did last year. There's ability with this wide receiver group to use them very creatively.
Yeah. I mean, Shenault, I was such a big fan of his, and I believe it was the 2018 season.
Huge,
before the injury. Or the season, just before he got injured, I think that season when I was like, this guy should be at the top of the list for the Heisman. The only reason he's not is because he's on a Colorado team that nobody's paying attention to. Everybody's always with the quarterbacks. And then he went ahead and got hurt. But still, he was such a phenomenal player, with a playmaker, like you said. Line him up here, line him up there. And he didn't post the greatest 40 time. But it just shows you, again, that's just, okay, not every wide receiver is going to post a 4.4, a 4.3. It takes more than that to be a really good receiver in the NFL, and Shenault looks like he's going to be one of those guys.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Shenault has that ability. They believe that Etienne has that sort of ability to move out, to play that Percy Harvin role. Shenault could play it in a different way. So, again, it's tricky when you're trying to talk about roles for these receivers. I think Marvin Jones, they visualized the role. He played under Bevel in Detroit, so they kind of know what he's going to be. Chark's an outside every down receiver. Those other 2 guys, it's going to be fascinating to see how they work, and also fascinating to see if they can use Colin Johnson's big body in ways that the last regime didn't. So there's a lot of potential and a lot of interesting things they could do at wide receiver.
Yep. Okay. Meanwhile, on the offensive line, Walker Little was drafted, the second pick in the second round. And boy, again, if you pay attention to college football, you knew when he won the co-offensive freshman of the year for the Pac-12, you knew that at that point he was targeted for a top 10 pick in the NFL draft when he came out. Then he has the injury and also opts out. So when he plays, if he plays right away, week 1, it fits on the team in any capacity, it'll be 3 years since he had stepped on a field and played football. It is the biggest mystery of this draft class. Mm-hmm. But he has such a high reward no matter where you picked him, especially outside the first round. It was interesting that he was picked as high as he was, though, because you're talking about mid-first round or wherever he was, mid-second round where he was taken. And I thought that was a little bit higher than most people thought he was going to go, but the talent's there.
Well, I think that's what's interesting about it. I guess it comes down to how you feel philosophically about the opting out stuff from last year. Because I looked at it, and anybody in the Pac-10, you sort of got why they opted out. The season was essentially canceled until what?
Yes.
October, November. And so many of these guys, and there's another one in the Jaguars draft class, Tafule, the 4th-round pick, they both opted out, him and Walker Little. And I talked to David Shaw, the Stanford coach, a couple of weeks after the draft, and he said, you got to remember, we didn't even have the coaches weren't in the offices in August. So basically, a Walker Little who knew he was going to the NFL went and started preparing for the NFL draft. And I didn't really want to do that, wanted to play, but at that point, for his own future, said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And then a month and a half later, they come back and say, okay, we're playing.
Yeah.
Well, that's easy, I think, from a fan and observer's point of view, and say, well, he should have just gone and played. From a purely logistical standpoint and what was really going on in the kid's life, it's a little bit of a different, I think that gives it a little bit of a different perspective. So I'm not going to say Urban Meyer wasn't nervous about it. He said after the draft that there was definitely a ton of research put into it, a ton of conversations with David Shaw, because you couldn't just put on the tape and see it. Yeah. He said you wanted to just click a button and be able to see what he had done. But as you said, in talking to David Shaw, there was no doubt in their mind going into the year where he got hurt. He said they were planning their left tackle for the following year because they knew he wouldn't be back after that season. He was coming out. He was going to be a top 15 pick. So ACLs on left tackles doesn't bother people as much as they might at a skill position. The feeling around here, and Urban Meyer talked, I think, last week about it. His phrase was essentially, I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but I'm really excited about this guy. That's sort of the feeling. Since the draft, there's a little bit more of a feeling with each conversation you have with people that there's a hope, and maybe more than just a wing and a prayer hope, that this might be a real steal in this draft. I don't really know why you wouldn't think he would be if you really did the research on him, but
it's all health.
It's an interesting pick. It's a really interesting pick.
And look, if he stays healthy, there's no doubt that the kid has got the talent to be a mainstay for a very long time. Where's the fit 2022? Because if you're going to draft him in the second round, you think that highly of him, he's probably going to start 2022 at the least.
Would think, some of it depends on Cam Robinson, who's in a franchise tag year, so he's on a 1-year deal. The ideal situation, obviously, is to have Cam Robinson play lights out, have Walker Little be as good as he wants, because, it's the old saying, no team walks around going, man, we've got too many great players.
Yeah.
So you'd figure out a way to make it work.
Sure.
Juwan Taylor and Cam Robinson. Juwan Taylor's the right tackle. Cam Robinson's the left. Urban Meyer said many times, and it's a known fact around here, those guys need to be better than they were last season. They think they can be. There's potential there. They're both second-round picks, early second-round picks. So they're premium talents. They weren't as consistent as you would like last year. So it seems like one of those is going to play itself out when you've got 3 good players.
Yeah.
2 of them are going to play well enough to be little as need things we talked about, so much time off, some time. In the long run, if Walker Little's as good as he's supposed to be, it's hard not seeing him at left tackle. And I don't know where that would mean for the other guys, but it would be hard not to see him there for the long run.
Okay, now on defense, the first pick in the second round for Jacksonville was Tyson Campbell at corner for Georgia. And what's interesting when you take a look at his profile is it talks about him splitting time at the cornerback position. And the player he split time with just happened to be DJ Daniel, who had a fourth round grade, and the Jags signed right after the draft. So they get both Georgia guys who competed for playing time until Daniel had his injury, and then that opened it up for Campbell to start the whole year last year. But you're talking about a lengthy speed guy at corner that looks like he just needs a little bit of technique work, and he's got tremendous potential.
Yeah, it was a little confusing to people after the draft because you've got C.J. Henderson, you got Shaquille Griffin that said, why would they draft him? Well, their point is in the NFL right now, you need 3 good corners, not 2.
Yes.
And you really need 3 or 4 for depth. So their idea was, are we breaking up? Or are we all right?
You can keep going. Go ahead, John.
Okay, you still hear me?
Yep.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, sorry about that. Their idea was they want to play a lot of man-to-man. And they feel like in this day and age, you need 3 corners who can play man-to-man. All 3 of their corners are now 6 feet and up. They feel like they're all long. They feel like they're all guys who can play that role. They believe that Campbell can be an inside slot corner. He hasn't played a whole lot of that.
Okay.
They believe his skill set lends itself to that. That's from what Urban Meyer was saying after the draft. That feels like where they see him. So, again, they feel like they need 3 guys who can cover in this scheme.
All right. And then also, again, we'll find out more once camp begins about how DJ Daniel fits in as well. Meanwhile, Andre Cisco, speaking about the secondary, was chosen in round 3. A great combination of a physical ball hawk. I mean, anytime you can get a DB that's not only physical, but also has great ball skills, you feel pretty confident. It's a great combo. He's a very talented kid.
Yeah, they feel like had he not been hurt, they feel like he may have been the first safety taken. I mean, and everything you read about the draft, it was probably either going to be him or Merrick from TCU as that top guy. And then Cisco sustained, he had a knee injury earlier. I forget which game. But as you said, the ball hawking skills, I think it's 17 interceptions in 2 years or 13. I mean,
13,
it's absurd
13,
how much this guy's around the ball. And they feel like this guy is a day one starter if healthy. I mean, I feel like he will make a contribution fast. The story of minicamp here a couple weeks ago was Walker Little, how well he moved.
Okay.
You get the idea that if Cisco had been able to be out there, he's still recovering from the injury. You get the idea that if he'd been able to be out there, that he'd have been one of those day one or one of those rookie minicamp stories as well. They feel like he's a guy who should come in and play right away. And there's the same sort of excitement level with him as there is Walker Little. Again, some of these, when you take injured players, they're available a little later than they might have been. So it's a little bit of a risk on that point. But in the NFL these days, if the team doctor checks them out and they feel like they're good to go, then they're on that draft board with the other guys.
Yeah, and this is a long rebuild situation. This isn't a franchise that's looking for players to, we're trying to win a Super Bowl next year, so we're trying to put this guy in and be our starter, and he's going to be a significant part of our team. This is for the long haul. It makes a lot of sense that the Jags would pick players like this. Let's stay on defense. Jay Tufele, you talked about him a little while ago. He also opted out. First team Pac-12 in 2019, an athletic 315-pound player. Talk a little bit about how he fits in with the defense, because I also wanted to ask you, which I haven't yet, about what the plan is as far as 4-3, 3-4. Of course, Cullen comes from Baltimore, a 3-4 team. You look at Chason, who seems to be more of a fit in a 3-4 scheme. So is it just going to be one of those defenses where you're just not going to know until they line up week 1, or are they eventually trying to get to a certain scheme?
Well, when we talk about it, it feels like if there's going to be a blueprint, it's the Ravens blueprint.
Okay.
And I hesitate to say that because now people hearing this are going to go look at the Ravens defense and say, well, it's going to be just like that. I don't know that it's going to be an exact blueprint, but that's sort of the concept in terms of what you said. There's some weeks the Ravens feel like a 3-4. There's some weeks they feel like a 4-3. That's certainly in the cards here when this team's playing a heavy run offense. I think their front's going to look different than when they're playing a pass-heavy offense. So I don't know that you can actually sit there and say, well, Tufele is going to be a pure nose, and it's going to be him here. It's going to depend on their situations, and it's going to depend on the look for the offense. But they love Tufele on that front. I mean, I feel like this is a guy who, had it not been for the opt-out, it was weird. When you looked at some mocks with Tufele, there were high second round, even late first round at times. You would see him at times, and then all of a sudden he wasn't. Well, nothing really changed except that he didn't play because of COVID.
Yeah.
So, again, this draft class, if it's got a theme, it's that it was highly regarded college players who are big, physical, fit the prototype. It is a prototypical draft class. Walker Little, Jay Tufele, height, weight, speed, they all fit, and measurables are all there. So everybody's excited about every draft, but Tufele is a guy that they feel like, I hate using the word steal, but they feel like in the fourth round, first pick of the fourth round, they were surprised he was still there. I'll put it that way. They were very surprised.
Yeah, because the team, they spent a lot of time building up the defensive line in the offseason.
They had to.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
And so why not just add another piece there? And again, something we'll talk more about once we kind of see how things go in training camp and some preseason games. How many preseason games are there going to be this year?
3.
3. Okay. So there's still not any talk about eliminating the preseason then?
Well, there's always talk about it because people want to do it. But I think among NFL people, it's always going to be a push and pull because as much as fans may not like it, the team from a developmental standpoint, there's still people who like being able to grade guys and decide the team based on what they do in preseason. Sure. Or at least have that be a factor.
Jordan Smith, 4th round draft pick. This is an interesting one. The kid from UAB who went to Florida, he was involved in that credit card scandal. I think anybody following college football knows exactly what we're talking about. Boy, it seems like just yesterday that happened. So then he transfers back into the big-time college football, this time with UAB, out of the group of 5, and he did really well. So, again, another defensive lineman. Is he more going to be one of those guys that can basically fit either on the defensive line, playing the rush end, or even if they want to line him up as an outside linebacker?
Well, I think they see him similarly in concept how they see Josh Allen and Kayvon Chase. I mean, he can stand up. He's going to rush the quarterback. If he's a good NFL player, it's going to be because he can put pressure on the passer. He can do other things, but that's the gist of it. He's another guy who Urban Meyer said, there's some developmental involved early here. There are NFL level pass rushing techniques and things that he's going to have to learn. And so I'm not going to say a year away, but I don't know that they expect him to come in and push Chase on or Allen the first year. Sure. But that's the role he's going to play. And in the long run, they're going to need him to, because pass rushers on this team, they have Allen, who I believe is going to be a big time player. They have Chase on, who has potential to be, and didn't have a very good year as a rookie last year. So that's a question people have is, well, where's that third guy? Where's that other guy to be that pass rusher that those guys are? Smith, it would be great if he's that this year for this team. I don't know if it's realistic to think he's that right now, but over the long run, that's what they want to see him develop into.
And then finally, Dylan Moses might have been the biggest name in the entire draft class, a player who was not drafted.
Yeah.
Ourlads had him as a 3rd-round grade. He missed 2019 with an ACL injury. Has the ability to be more of a Mike middle linebacker type player. How do you think he fits in? And this was a steal to get this guy without having to use up a draft pick.
Yeah, I hate to say right now how he's going to fit in because of the obvious. He didn't get drafted because of the knee. And if you read about what went on with this guy, he said he struggled with it last year. He played, but he wasn't at the level he was beforehand. So the obvious answer is everything depends on the knee.
Yeah.
If he's back, if he gets that thing to 100%, which happens, if he gets back to 100%, then he feels like a sky's the limit guy. He feels like a guy who could play inside. He could play the mic. He could be what you're looking for. Everything but that knee says that's what he ought to be. So for me to say how he's going to be, it purely depends on that. I think it's a huge story to watch, though, because as you said, third round grade on a middle linebacker, that's really high. Middle, when you get drafted second or third round at that spot, teams are basically saying, we believe you're going to start, and we'll see how it is for a second contract.
Yeah.
So I couldn't pencil him in there right now because that's silly. I haven't seen him on the field yet. But as exciting as an undrafted rookie can be, he fits that. Yeah. If that knee's okay, look out.
And that could be interesting because if he, in 2022, they feel like he can actually start, then I don't know what Joe Schobert's contract situation is, but of course he makes a lot of money, and we all know it's the NFL. And if you can save a lot of money and bring in a young kid, and that's what you're going to. What is Schobert's situation? Is he tied in for only one more year as far as the cap?
I believe it's one more year in terms of where if you look at the realistic possibilities, I believe it's one more year, might be two. Okay. I haven't looked at it in a while, so I apologize.
That's okay. We'll talk more about that during training camp. And a couple more things before I let you go. I just want to remind all Jacksonville fans that this is the Ourlads draft guide. Again, the 2021 guide. It's still a perfect time to get the guide. Just because draft's over doesn't mean it's over and you've lost your chance, because this is where all the profiles are. And you know where the players are, including the Jacksonville Jags. So you get all the profiles of the Jags. Coming up is the draft review guide. This would be, I'm going to work on this right now. And the Jags are one of my 11 teams that I have to work on myself for the draft review guide that'll be out in a month. That's why I wanted John on. And John, what are you working on as far as the Jacksonville Jaguars website between now and training camp?
Well, got OTAs coming up. So obviously, as we talked about in the show, for some teams with third or fourth year head coaches, OTAs can be kind of a yawn. There's not a whole lot to learn about what they're going to do. For teams with first year head coaches, you're learning about where guys are fitting in. You're learning about what kind of scheme they might use, about how players feel about coaches and vice versa. So OTAs coverage there, and then throughout the off season, we'll have a lot of our Jaguars local analysts breaking down 6, 7, 8 topics around the team. So if you're looking to read about the Jags, that's where to find it this summer.
And I think it's going to be one of the more interesting teams to follow because of Trevor Lawrence, because of Urban Meyer, and like you said, because there's a lot of other teams that, you kind of know what they're doing at this time of season, but the Jags are not one of them. So, yeah, I think it's going to be great following Jacksonville, and I'm sure you're probably going to have a lot of fun covering them this year as well.
Looking forward to it. It's been a while.
Thanks, John. We'll talk to you again during training camp.
All right, guys. Thank you. Appreciate you.